Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at an article from the front page of the Delhi edition. Prime Minister Modi has launched an undersea cable or a submarine optical fiber cable that connects Chennai with the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. This submarine OFC cable, which is around 2,300 kilometers in length, connects Chennai with a chain of islands in the Andaman and Nicobar group, including Port Blair, Little Andaman, Car Nicobar, Great Nicobar, Havelock, etc. This digital connectivity project is set to bring high-speed internet connectivity to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and it is expected to bring more efficient and cheaper connectivity, which can help in promoting tourism, the economy of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and as well as India's national security. This project is a part of the government's initiative to bring better connectivity to the border areas and island regions in the interest of promoting the country's national security and as well as in the interest of promoting the economy of the border areas and these island regions. See, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands is of great strategic and economic significance for India because it is located in the immediate neighborhood of Southeast Asia, which is seen as a hub of manufacturing and economic activities. Then it is also located at the opening of the Strait of Malacca, which is a strategic choke point, and it serves as the home base for India's Tri-Services Command, where the Indian Army, the Indian Navy and the Indian Air Force maintain a strong presence because of its strategic significance. So the launch of the submarine OFC cable is expected to bring the Andaman and Nicobar Islands closer to mainland India by providing high-speed internet connectivity, and it is expected to give a boost to the local economy and as well as provide better connectivity for the Indian Armed Forces. After launching the submarine OFC cable, the Prime Minister has said that port-led development shall be brought to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands by upgrading the existing airport at Port Blair and by constructing new airports at Diglipur, Car Nicobar and Campbell Bay. The Prime Minister has also announced the construction of new passenger terminals at Swaraj Dweep, Shahid Dweep and as well as at Long Island. So this article provides us an opportunity to talk a little more about submarine optical fiber cables. See, submarine OFC cables, they form the backbone of the global telecom and internet infrastructure. They provide for intercontinental communication and they are capable of transferring data at the rate of several terabits per second. See, generally, people assume that a large part of the telecom and internet connectivity is enabled by satellites. But this is largely a misconception because nearly 99% of the global internet communication is enabled by submarine OFCs. A large majority of the data traffic that is passing across the globe is transmitted through undersea optical fiber cables, and they form the backbone of the modern digital economy, which is built on high-speed telecom and internet connectivity. See, even though satellite-based communication is best suited for a number of defense and strategic applications, it is not viable for large-scale commercial applications. Because satellite-based communication provides for data transfer only at the rate of several megabits per second, and upon this, it could be very expensive, there could be a lag in the communication, and it also poses difficulties in ensuring widespread geographic coverage. Whereas on the other hand, transoceanic cables that are laid on the sea floor, they can provide an effective medium for facilitating global internet connectivity. Even though the laying of such submarine cables is very expensive, they provide for a cheaper, reliable and effective way of establishing intercontinental digital connectivity. So today, major coastal cities around the world have these submarine cable landing points which serve as the nodes for internet connectivity. These long optical fiber cables that are laid on the seabed, they establish digital connectivity between key regions of the world and they help in establishing high-speed internet connectivity. The laying of such submarine cables can be traced back to the 1850s when the then British government, along with British private enterprises such as the East India Company, started laying telegraph lines across the oceans in order to connect the British colonies with Britain. The British took this initiative to lay submarine cables in order to promote telegraph-based communication which could provide for faster communication between the British government and the British colonies in order to protect the trade and security interests of the Crown. Then, with the evolution of telecom-based communication and the internet, the era of optical fiber cables began in the 1980s. These OFC cables provided for high-speed connectivity with higher bandwidth, and they also offered the advantage of cost because OFC-based communication could be easily scaled up to reach a wider audience. So it is on this foundation that modern digital internet and telecom connectivity has been built upon, and hence submarine OFC cables and their landing points are treated by a number of governments as a part of their critical infrastructure. Because these submarine OFC landing points connect a country with the rest of the world, and they play a critical role in the country's defense, national security, and as well as the country's economy, which is largely powered by the digital economy. These submarine OFC cables and their landing points are usually laid and maintained by private corporations and by private internet and telecom service providers. But in the case of India, even public service providers can be involved because maintaining and protecting this critical infrastructure is crucial to the country's national security and as well as to the country's economy. These submarine cables, which are a part of a country's critical infrastructure, also face a number of threats. These cables on the sea floor, they could be damaged by the movement of ships or submarines. They could also be damaged by large aquatic animals such as sharks, and they could also be damaged during natural disasters such as cyclones, earthquakes, etc. Any such damage to a submarine cable will affect the availability of internet services in the region, and hence they require constant maintenance and upkeep. Then another threat faced by submarine cables is that they are vulnerable to espionage by foreign intelligence agencies. Since critical data of the country is passing through such cables, hostile governments and foreign intelligence agencies could tap into these cables, and this not only threatens the country's national security, but it also violates the individual's data privacy. Since India occupies a strategic location in the Indian Ocean region, it also forms a crucial link in submarine OFC connectivity. There are 5 submarine cable landing stations in India, and 2 of them are major landing stations. The landing station at Mumbai connects India and South Asia with critical landing stations located in a number of Middle Eastern countries, in Europe and in Africa. This further helps India to reach out to Western Europe and as well as to North America and South America. Then the landing station at Chennai connects India and South Asia with the Southeast Asian region and as well as the larger Asia Pacific region. Then apart from these 2 major landing stations, there are 3 minor landing stations at Cochin, Tuticorin and Trivandrum. But amongst all these 5 landing stations in India, the landing station at Mumbai is the most crucial and the most important because it has the highest concentration of submarine OFC cables. Even India's submarine OFC cables are vulnerable to the threats that we discussed. For example, in 2016, when Cyclone Varda hit Tamil Nadu and the east coast of India, the landing station in Chennai and a few submarine cables in the Bay of Bengal were damaged, and this resulted in internet outage for a few days across India and as well as across few parts of South Asia and Southeast Asia. But the biggest advantage of submarine OFC cables is that they are resilient and they have inbuilt redundancy. That is, when such cables are damaged, you need not wait for the cables to be repaired because the flow of internet traffic and data could be easily switched to other submarine cables as a temporary measure until the damaged cables are repaired. So this inbuilt redundancy makes submarine OFC cables resilient to various threats and disasters. But yes, such damage could result in internet outage for a short period, and this tends to have an impact on the country's national security and on the country's economy. Then of course, cyber rights activists are concerned about the tapping of these landing stations and submarine cables by both Indian security agencies and as well as by foreign agencies. India's technical intelligence agencies such as the NTRO are known to set up a tap at these major submarine cable landing points in order to intercept the internet traffic that is flowing in and out of India. So the concern is that this violates data privacy of the individuals and as well as the fundamental rights of the citizens. then similar attempts by foreign intelligence agencies can threaten India's national security and as well as the privacy of the data of Indian citizens. India's biggest concern is that most of the submarine OFC cables that pass across the Atlantic, Pacific and the Indian Ocean have been laid and are being maintained by Western companies. So this makes Indian data and India's internet traffic vulnerable to espionage from foreign intelligence agencies. And this concern of India with regard to Western domination of submarine OFC cables is shared by other like-minded countries as well, such as the members of BRICS. So in order to counter this Western domination with regard to submarine OFC cables, the BRICS grouping, which includes Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, have decided to establish their own submarine OFC cable network, and this project approved by BRICS seeks to connect the member states through a cable network that is independent of the Western cable networks. Now let's take up another article from page number 1. The Government of India has assured the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Human Resource Development that the current academic year shall not be a zero academic year. See, over the last 5 months, we have discussed numerous times that the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent lockdown has shut down schools and colleges, not just in India but around the world. Most of the education institutions have switched to the virtual format of learning, that is digital learning or e-learning, which largely relies upon the internet. We have even discussed the findings of UN organizations such as the UNICEF, which points out that the closure of schools and colleges has disrupted learning around the world, and as a result of the pandemic and the lockdown, around 24 million school-going children are expected to drop out, and the UNICEF labels this as the largest ever disruption to learning. So in this context, the opposition MPs who are a part of the Parliamentary Committee on Human Resource Development, they have raised concern about this academic year turning into a zero academic year. So in response to these concerns expressed by the Parliamentary Standing Committee, the Union HRD Ministry has assured that it will ensure that this academic year shall not be a zero academic year, and it will try to reopen the educational institutions by putting in place all possible social distancing measures in order to ensure the safety of students. In this regard, the HRD Ministry is going to consult with all the stakeholders over the coming 2 weeks, and it is going to invite feedback from state governments, from educational institutions, from the Health Ministry and as well as from the Home Ministry. So based on this feedback, the HRD Ministry will come out with a set of guidelines that will allow for schools and colleges to reopen in a safe manner, but the final decision to reopen the schools shall be left to the state governments, as the subject of education is on the concurrent list of the 7th schedule of the Constitution. See, members of the Parliamentary Committee have appreciated the role of digital e-learning platforms in ensuring continuous learning despite the pandemic. But however, we have discussed time and again that complete dependency on virtual learning has its own set of limitations as well. And these limitations have been raised by the members of the Parliamentary Standing Committee, and they have expressed concern about the impact of these limitations on education. The biggest limitation of virtual learning is that of accessibility. Poor internet connectivity, lack of electricity, and lack of access to digital devices, especially in the remote rural areas and amongst the poor sections of the society, can significantly reduce access to virtual e-learning. Because not every household in the country has access to high-speed internet and digital devices such as smartphones and computers. So for this reason, the Parliamentary Standing Committee has called upon the HRD Ministry to make use of other platforms as well to promote virtual learning, such as television, radio, print, newspapers, etc. So in the light of all these concerns that have been flagged by the members of the Parliamentary Standing Committee, the HRD Ministry has assured them that the centre will ensure that this academic year shall not be a zero academic year and schools shall be reopened as soon as possible. Now let's take up a column from page number 6, written by Mr. R.K. Raghavan, a former IPS officer who served the CBI as its director. This column deals with the topic of ethics in civil services. See, recently the UPSC announced the results for the 2019 Civil Services examination. In this context, the writer is questioning whether the UPSC has been selecting the right kind of aspirants. He is essentially trying to analyze the ethical and moral values that drive civil service aspirants and whether the UPSC is selecting the right kind of aspirants who take up this prestigious examination in order to enter the elite Indian bureaucracy. See, there is no doubt that the UPSC Civil Services examination is one of the most sought out examinations in the world. It is also widely regarded as one of the toughest examinations in the world. Every year, close to 1 million aspirants apply for this prestigious examination, but hardly around 4 to 5 lakh aspirants who are well prepared appear for the prelims examination. Then after completing the 3 stages of the examination, around 900 students are selected by the UPSC depending on that year's vacancies. So this roughly provides us a success rate of less than 4%, and this extremely low success rate points to the tough screening measures employed by the UPSC in order to select the right kind of aspirants who can man the Indian administration. See, the civil services in India is a highly sought after career choice for lakhs of students every year, and there are a number of factors which motivate them to opt for a career in the civil services. Some of them are motivated by the power and the status symbol that the civil services brings along with it, which is largely a result of its colonial hangover. See, in the colonial era, the relationship between the civil administration and the subjects was more or less that of a master-slave relationship. Back in those days, the civil servants were largely feared instead of being respected. But post-independence, the colonial hangover on the civil services has turned the civil services into a power and status symbol. That's one of the reasons why you will find aspirants in almost every single household. And if you contrast this with other countries, with the civil services of other countries, the same kind of hype around civil services doesn't exist in those countries. There are thousands of aspirants who aspire for the civil services because it provides them an opportunity to serve the country, to serve the society, and a few other aspirants are also motivated by the challenge posed by the tough examination process of the UPSC. So it's a combination of these factors that makes lakhs of aspirants attend the civil services examination every year. But the writer is questioning whether the UPSC is selecting the right kind of aspirants with the right kind of ethical and moral values. He is also trying to evaluate whether there is a mid-career review of one's performance which could help in weeding out the dishonest and corrupt officers. See, Sardar Patel, who is regarded as the patron saint of Indian civil services, referred to the Indian bureaucracy as the country's steel frame. He placed a lot of faith in all India services such as the IAS, the IPS and the Indian Forest Service to lead the socio-economic development of independent India, and he recognized the civil services as the steel frame or the backbone of the administration. But the writer argues that over the last 7 odd decades, the Indian bureaucracy is largely known for its poor governance track record. He says that the IAS and the IPS officers are the most powerful and most visible symbols of administration because as a district magistrate or as a district collector and as a district superintendent of police, it is the IAS and the IPS officers who are at the forefront of delivery of essential services based on the socio-economic programs designed by the state governments and the central government. But despite this pivotal role of the IAS and the IPS in ensuring good governance and socio-economic welfare, Indian bureaucracy has by and large been tainted by corruption, and it has consistently underperformed, leading to poor governance in the country. Now, herein lies an irony. On one side, you have one of the toughest examinations in the world being conducted by the UPSC, which by and large is seen as an honest organization by the aspirants, and it has successfully managed to retain its image of integrity through the transparent conduct of examinations year after year. Unlike the UPSC, the state public service commissions, they have a notorious image. They are known for their corrupt and opaque practices at the entry level itself, and unlike them, the UPSC has kept its image intact, and through one of the toughest screening examinations in the world, it selects the best possible aspirants who could serve the country by being a part of the steel frame or the Indian bureaucracy. But ironically, a few years after entering into service, a large number of civil servants are known to turn corrupt, and as their career progresses, they are known for their poor governance and poor performance track record. This is what explains the poor delivery of services in India. It is in this context that R.K. Raghavan questions the screening process and as well as the mid-career performance review. See, in order to select the best possible aspirants from the available talent pool, the UPSC looks out for certain desirable characteristics and desirable traits amongst the aspirants while screening them through the examination process. One of the desirable characteristics is a good grasp over a diverse set of knowledge. That's the reason why the prelims and the mains examination is testing you on the depth of your knowledge in a wide variety of subjects, ranging from history to international relations, from geography to disaster management, etc. But however, within the knowledge domain, the emphasis of the UPSC examination has shifted from factual to analytical. Earlier, that is prior to 2011, UPSC exams were largely fact-driven. But in order to disincentivize rote learning and memory-based learning, the UPSC initiated a series of reforms in 2011 and 2013 to both the prelims and the mains examination to make them more analytical in nature. Yes, your ability to remember facts is still very essential, but it's your analytical ability that will help you clear the examination. So there is no doubt that those who clear this tough examination have one of the best analytical mindsets. But however, the question is that, do these aspirants have the right kind of ethical and moral values as well? So in order to test aspirants on their ethical and moral values, the UPSC introduced a separate paper on ethics, that is your GS paper 4, in your mains examination, and these values are also tested out in your personality test. But however, these measures have not been entirely foolproof when it comes to filtering out dishonest individuals. So over the years, a number of committees have dealt with the subject of reforming the civil services examination, and this includes the Mudaliar Committee, the First Administrative Reforms Commission, the Second Administrative Reforms Commission, the Kothari Committee, and more recently the Alag Committee. While some of these recommendations have been implemented, a large number of these recommendations have been neglected by the government, and hence the writer is calling upon the recruitment institution, that is the UPSC, and training academies such as Labasna in Mussoorie and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel National Police Academy in Hyderabad to completely overhaul the selection and training process of civil servants in order to make the Indian bureaucracy a value-driven bureaucracy. The writer argues that today's civil servants need to possess the highest standards of ethical and moral values along with their domain knowledge. So he is calling upon the government, the UPSC and the training academies to prioritize values such as compassion, empathy, honesty and integrity. Next, we have a column on page number 6 written by India's former National Security Advisor, Mr. M.K. Narayanan. In this column, he talks about China's aggression against India and its aggression in the South China Sea. He talks about the dependency of the global economy on China, and he points out how difficult it is to isolate China economically from the rest of the world. But this is a discussion that we have had multiple times over the last few months, so I kindly request you to go through this column once. Next, on page number 7, we have another repeat column which deals with the fading relevance of the World Health Organization. This is again a topic that we have covered multiple times ever since the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, so I would request you to go through this column as well. Now let's take up an article from page number 9 that deals with the ongoing peace process with the Naga rebels. See, the Naga insurgency is one of the oldest insurgent movements that India has been dealing with. The Naga insurgent movement broke out as soon as India became independent, and their separatist demands existed even prior to independence. So in 1975, the government sought to resolve the insurgent crisis by signing the Shillong Accord with the Naga National Council, which was leading the insurgent struggle. But the Shillong Accord failed to establish peace in the region because the terms of the Shillong Accord were not acceptable to few leaders of the NNC, and these leaders broke away from the insurgent movement and they went on to establish their own insurgent outfit known as the NSCN in 1980. Later, the NSCN broke into two different factions due to ideological differences between the leaders, and this is how the NSCN Isaac Muiwa faction and NSCN Kaplang faction were established. Even today, the NSCN Kaplang faction remains active and it continues to target India by establishing a base in Myanmar. Whereas NSCN Isaac Muiwa faction signed a ceasefire with the government of India in 2001. And as a part of the peace process, a framework agreement was signed in 2015 between the government of India and the NSCN-IM. This framework agreement laid the foundation for negotiations between the government interlocutors and the Naga rebel groups led by the NSCN-IM, which could eventually pave the way for the signing of a Naga peace accord in order to resolve the Naga insurgency crisis. So as per the framework agreement, the Naga political groups led by NSCN-IM have been negotiating with the government of India through an interlocutor, that is Mr. R.N. Ravi, who is a former officer of the Intelligence Bureau who has extensive field experience in dealing with Naga insurgency. So to take the peace process forward, the central government appointed R.N. Ravi as the governor of Nagaland so that he could directly lead the negotiations with the Naga rebel groups and NSCN-IM. But over the last few months, differences have emerged between R.N. Ravi and NSCN-IM. In June, we had discussed that the governor of Nagaland had written an open letter blaming the NSCN-IM for increasing violence in Nagaland, and he even went on to label the NSCN-IM as an organized armed gang that was brazenly engaging in violence by openly challenging the legitimacy and the authority of the state government and the constitution. So over the last 2 months, these differences have increased between the interlocutor and the Naga groups, and hence the leader of NSCN-IM, Mr. Muiwa, has demanded the government of India to remove R.N. Ravi as the interlocutor, and as a result, the ongoing Naga peace talks is facing a major obstacle. Now let's take up the practice questions for today. Which of the following statements are correct? The Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana is one of the components of Ayushman Bharat. Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana offers universal access to free drugs, diagnostics and medical treatment. Amongst the given statements, the first statement is correct, so option A is the right answer. See, Ayushman Bharat was launched as a flagship healthcare program in 2018 and it includes 2 components. The first component is the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which happens to be one of the world's largest public health insurance program. The second component of Ayushman Bharat is the establishment of health and wellness centers across the country. But the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana is not a universal program and it does not provide free access to drugs, diagnostics and medical treatment for all citizens. Instead, it is an insurance program that is extended to eligible beneficiaries identified as per the socio-economic caste census. Basically, the scheme is limited to BPL families and an insurance of 5 lakh rupees is provided to each family. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 4, insurance claims under the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana fell by more than 50% during the lockdown as most people could not access even basic healthcare services. Another related article on the same page points out that nearly 78% of rural India stopped working during the lockdown. Now let's take up the next question. The National Building Code of India has been developed by the Bureau of Indian Standards. Option C is the right answer. This question has been asked because we have an editorial on page number 6 which analyzes the tragic fire accidents in 2 COVID-19 hospitals in Gujarat and in Andhra Pradesh. These accidents led to the killing of a number of COVID-19 patients, and the editorial holds the blatant violation of building norms to be responsible for these man-made disasters. See, the Bureau of Indian Standards has developed the National Building Code of India. These construction norms and guidelines have to be enforced by the local authorities, that is by the local municipal authorities, but due to corruption at the local level and lack of enforcement, these norms and guidelines are frequently violated by the builders, which results in such incidents. Now let's take up the next question. In the context of indigenous weapons development, what is Pinaka that is often seen in news? Is it an armed UAV developed by HAL? Is it a multi-barrel rocket launcher developed by DRDO? Or is it an artificial intelligence driven bomb disposal robot developed by the Indian Army? Or is it option D, which says that Pinaka is not indigenous and it is an air-to-air missile imported from Israel? The correct answer is option B. Pinaka is a multi-barrel rocket launcher developed indigenously by the DRDO. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 11, the Defence Minister has reiterated the need to make India's defence sector self-reliant. As per this mandate laid out by the Defence Minister, the Ministry of Defence has come out with a negative list to avoid imports of indigenous defence platforms such as the LCA Tejas, Pinaka rocket launches, Akash missile systems, etc., which are already available domestically. So the negative list prohibits the armed forces from procuring similar systems through imports. This basically encourages the armed forces to procure indigenously produced defence platforms, and this could further boost indigenization and self-reliance. Now let's take up the next question. Farakka Barrage has been built across which river? The correct answer is option C. It has been built across the Ganga river. This question has been asked because we have two related articles on page number 11. In these articles, the state governments of Bihar and UP have blamed Nepal for not cooperating with regard to flood management, and according to these two states, this has directly contributed to the flooding of the Ganga and its tributaries in the states of Bihar and UP. This article also makes a reference to the Farakka Barrage that has been built across the Ganga river in West Bengal. See, the Farakka Barrage is a source of dispute between India and Bangladesh. The Farakka Barrage was primarily built to divert the waters of the Ganga river to the Hooghly river so that the silt deposited in the Hooghly river could be dredged naturally in order to help in the operation of the Kolkata port without the need for mechanical dredging. But the backwaters of Farakka Barrage is known to cause flooding in Bihar, and it is also blamed by Bangladesh for causing environmental and ecological damage, and it is also held responsible for affecting the natural flow of the Ganga river in the downstream areas. Now let's take up the next question. A country's balance of payments or BOP takes into account import of goods and services, export of goods and services, inward and outward flow of capital, flow of remittances. All the four are correct. Option D is the right answer. See, balance of payments or BOP is basically a statement of all the transactions that were made between entities in one country, that includes the government entities, the private sector and the individuals with the rest of the world in a given time period. The balance of payments includes the transactions carried out in both the current account and the capital account. See, the current account covers the country's net trade in goods and services, and as well as net earnings on cross-border investments and net transfer payments, including that of inward flow of remittances. A deficit in this account creates a current account deficit. Then the capital account of a country consists of imports and exports of capital and foreign aid. And on the BOP statement, the sum of all these transactions should be zero. This is an ideal situation. Because see, when a country is exporting a good or a service under the current account, it is basically reflected as an import of foreign capital under the capital account. This logic applies vice versa as well. So essentially, the sum of your current account and capital account transactions should cancel out each other, or otherwise a situation will arise wherein the country won't be able to pay for its imports, and in such a situation it needs to make use of its foreign exchange reserves. This scenario is usually referred to as a balance of payments deficit. Back in 1991, it was this crisis that India dealt with, which is referred to as the BOP crisis. During this crisis, India's foreign exchange reserves were capable of sustaining only a few days of imports, and hence to avert the crisis, India sought the assistance of IMF, and following this, India introduced the historic LPG reforms. So according to this article on page number 15, the Union Minister for Commerce and Industry, Piyush Goyal, has said that India's balance of payments is going to be very strong this year, which means that India might register a BOP surplus because Indian exports have improved and imports into the country have fallen, according to the Union Minister. Now let's take up a practice question from the 2015 prelims paper. The Fortaleza Declaration, recently in news, is related to the affairs of BRICS. Option B is the right answer. It was this declaration which led BRICS to establish the new development bank and the contingent reserve arrangement. Finally, let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question: submarine OFCs are the backbone of the global telecom and internet infrastructure. Discuss in the Indian context. The second question: compassion and honesty are what must guide successful entrants into the civil services. Critically analyze. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the comment section below. So this concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.